Thank you, everybody, for joining us today and taking part in our session. Really excited to talk with you all over the next hour. This is the Leveraging Digital Museum Resources for Distance Learning session. My name is Tess Porter, and I'm a digital content producer and educator at the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access, which is a central education office here at the Smithsonian. We have the wonderful opportunity of working with all of the Smithsonian's museums, research, education, and cultural centers. And we really focus on kind of helping make all of the great things that we have available online for people to access, adapt, and use. Philippa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Philippa Rappoport, work with Tess at the Center for Learning and Digital Access. I'm an educator there, and then I also have a background in folklore, so I'm often particularly interested in bringing in community voices to our education projects. Happy to be here.
So our hope today is that what we're going to share with you will help all of you in finding tools and techniques to support learning, to have and share experiences and build community with learners over distance. We're going to do a few different things today. We're going to start off with an introduction to the Smithsonian Learning Lab, which I know some of the people in this session are already familiar with, the Arizona State Museum, who has content on the site. I'll share more about what the lab is and how it works in a moment. Then we're going to talk about some techniques that we use that I think work wonderfully with any type of museum resource, or really any type of artwork, object, document, to help students look closely and make connections and consider perspectives. We'll model how facilitating that type of activity might work in a digital space together. We'll show some examples of learning experiences on the Learning Lab that can help kind of share experiences and build community and look closely. And then we'll have some time for discussion. Philippa, is there anything else that you'd like to add to kind of frame what we're doing for the next hour before I get started?
No, I think this is great. I guess one quick thing to point out is that it's really wonderful that we have such a wide array of content specialists here, because the Learning Lab really works for all kinds of topics.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think Philip and I are both really interested to hear kind of your experiences too in navigating distance learning during this really difficult time, and hear any questions you have or any ideas that this sparks for you. Our hope kind of leaving today is that we can continue having conversations and maybe build on some of the ideas that we start talking about now during a May session. So throughout this session today, we'll have time for kind of a more open Q&A at the end with voice, but anytime as Philip and I are presenting, please feel free to pop in questions or ideas into the chat. We're both watching it. And then again, we'll have time for kind of a larger Q&A at the end. Before I get started too, just in case this session ends before I'm able to share it, I wanted to share our contact information. I can add this to the Google folder too, but we'd love to keep talking. So please reach out after today. Okay, so I'm gonna get started. Philippa, are you seeing the right screen?
Yep.
Okay. And let me plug the URL into the chat
I'll
here as well.
do the URLs, Tess. You can go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I got the first one here.
Okay.
So this is the Smithsonian Learning Lab, which, as I mentioned earlier, is a free online platform that we launched just a few years ago after years of research with teachers and students. We were trying to understand how to best support teachers in using the resources that we have here at the Smithsonian, both in kind of accessing and creating opportunities for adaptation and sharing. While we designed the site with K through 12 educators in mind, it's open to everyone, open to informal educators, museum educators, college educators, students, parents and caregivers, and anyone who's interested in kind of accessing what we have and creating learning experiences with them. So we designed it around three main ideas that I wanted to run through quickly as a way to talk about what the site is and how it works. So those are discover, create, and share. So on the Learning Lab, you can discover a few different things. You can discover what we call resources, which is kind of a blanket term we use to describe many different things. It includes objects and artwork that you'd find within the museums, but it also includes primary source documents, also blog posts and articles, but also audio and video recordings, lesson plans, websites, and a whole lot more. And again, these come from across the Smithsonian. I don't know how many of you know this, but the Smithsonian is the world's largest museum and research complex, which is really exciting. So in the lab, you'll find resources from all of our museums here in DC, like the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Freer and Sackler galleries, which are our museums of Asian art, but also from the Cooper Hewitt in New York, the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in Panama, and a whole lot more. So again, resources come from across the institution and kind of involve many different things. And they are the building blocks of what we call collections, which are interactive learning experiences. They can take many different forms, and we'll show some examples later, so I won't talk too much about it now. But for the time being, you can picture collections in a few different ways. They can be as simple as an aggregation of resources around a particular topic or theme. Say, if you wanted to bring together artworks that depict communities. They include teaching collections, which involve usually some suggestions for educators on how to use these resources for learning, whether they're guiding questions, maybe a worksheet, maybe a hands-on activity. And then collections also involve student activities, which are designed for students to use firsthand and independently. And these collections are things that anybody can create. So not just teachers, not just educators, but also students as well, which I think is a really exciting opportunity to have students share their research, their experiences, and collaborate with each other. I think at any time, but especially when we aren't able to be together in person. So there are tools to help any user create a collection. I won't go through all of them now, but to speak briefly about some of the ones that I think are most important. When you create a collection for the first time, you don't have to start from scratch. If you find something else that someone created and think, all right, this is awesome, but all right, I might want to make some adaptations, maybe bring in a worksheet or a kind of activity that I've already designed, bring in some resources that are more locally relevant, you can do that. You can copy and adapt a collection that anyone else has created and published on the Learning Lab to kind of fit your own needs. There are tools to build in interactivity, say to build in questions for learners to answer, highlight areas of interest. And as I mentioned briefly, you aren't restricted to just what the Smithsonian has in creating Learning Lab collections. You can upload something externally. So whether you find something in another kind of institution's website that you want to bring in, or perhaps your own, you can upload a resource from an external website. You can also upload resources from your own computer. So if you have a worksheet that you've already created and want to upload it into the collection you're creating, you can do that. Maybe a photograph a student took, you can upload that too. And then I mentioned the Arizona State Museum earlier. They use this feature to upload resources from their own museum and create collections with them. So it was a wonderful way to kind of bring in their knowledge and create content to easily share. And I can point to where those are later. They're really wonderful collections. And then finally, you can share what you create with others. When you create a collection for the first time, it's unpublished, which means it's just viewable to you and those that you send the URL to. So if you're collaborating with colleagues, want to share something privately with students, you can do that. But when you publish it, it becomes part of the Learning Lab database and kind of is added into this continuously growing learning community. So far, there are over 6,000 Learning Lab collections published in the lab. I just checked today, which is really exciting. So there's a lot to kind of learn and share from. Finally, there's the ability to embed an interactive version of a collection you create onto an external website. So say that you create something, but you don't want kind of your learners, your students, your users to leave the website that you're already using to access what you created. There's an iframe code on every collection where you can embed an interactive version externally. So it's a wonderful way to kind of keep your content on your site as well. So that is the lab in a nutshell. And I just wanted to highlight briefly this final section here at the bottom, Learn, where we aggregate resources that we hope will help everyone in not only learning how to use the Learning Lab, but think about ways to use museum resources for really deep learning. So we have a blog where we share experiences from teachers, from museum educators, and more. Office hours that we hold every Tuesday from 4 to 5 p.m. where it'll be me or one of my colleagues behind a camera ready to answer tech and pedagogical questions and more. So before I move on, I wanted to pause. If there are any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. I know I went through everything quickly and I'm happy to talk more. While I wait for questions to come in, I also wanted to speak briefly to a new initiative we're doing here at the Smithsonian to try and support teachers and caregivers and students navigate distance learning during this really difficult time for all of us. There's a banner at the top of the Learning Lab here, distance learning resources. And I'll plug this URL in the chat too. This is a page where we are aggregating distance learning resources from across the Smithsonian, and not just in the Learning Lab too. And what we're really trying to do with this page is not only support a variety of educators and learners, but also kind of through that, be sure that we include a huge variety of kind of tech able activities. So not only kind of more high-tech things like learning kind of interactives and games, educational games, but also low-tech and no-tech activities. And so this page is large and long, and I won't go through all of it, but I wanted to highlight a few things that I hope will be of help to kind of everyone joining us today. At near the top here, there are 2 resources to help new users get started in the Learning Lab and learn how to use the platform and begin creating those Learning Lab collections. Here, the Getting Started in the Learning Lab guide and a video recording that my colleague made of her walking through the guide. I have this one open in another tab. To speak briefly about what this is really a guide to kind of everything I'm going to be able to talk about today in our time together and everything I won't. It goes through all of the basic and more advanced features of the lab. So it breaks down, you know, what the lab is, what resources and collections are, but I'll also talk about how do you search and find resources and collections? How do I begin creating something, whether I want to start from scratch or copy something that someone else created? How do I add in interactivity and how do I embed it on another website? This PDF goes through all of that. Again, that's located on the distance learning page here. It's also located at a URL I'm typing in the chat now, s.si.edu/SLL-guide. That'll take you right to it. I also uploaded this PDF to the Google folder for this session. As we go further down, what we're doing here is really trying to aggregate resources that we hope will help a variety of audiences, like I said. Here we have our resources for national audiences that we've aligned to key curriculum standards themes and organized by English language arts, social studies, science, and Spanish language. These are updated daily as new resources are created. For our DC public schools, we've also aggregated content to the curriculum pacing guides. We have resources for caregivers and families, including a weekly choice board where we create kind of a choice board of activities that to help find activities to keep students learning and engaged at home, kind of based on what they're interested in exploring. Resources for teens and tweens and lifelong learners. And then kind of outside lesson plans and activities, we also have a calendar of daily live learning opportunities from across the Smithsonian. So these range from live online opportunities for caregivers and families, for young students, for older students, for educators, including chats with experts, or for educators, opportunities to take part in the live webinar and learn some kind of pedagogical techniques that work really well over distance when exploring museum resources, and more. So if you're interested, I highly recommend checking out this page. I think there's a lot to discover and I hope help here. So with that said, are there any questions I can answer before I move forward? I'm going to go back to the home page. Philippa, anything else that I missed before I move ahead?
I don't think so. That was great.
Okay. So what I wanted to share now is what kind of more demonstrate how the lab works and how what these resources I've been talking about actually look like within the lab. So in the chat, I'd love to know, what are you curious about in the Learning Lab? Are there any types of kind of resources or topics you're interested in seeing what the Smithsonian has on? I'll use kind of terms thrown out to start a search and look for resources related to it. So if you're interested in community, if you're interested in abstract art, I see World War II. I think that's a great starting point. I'll do a search for that. So when you, to find resources and collections in the Learning Lab, you'll use the search in the upper left-hand side of the screen. This will be located on the upper left of every page in the Learning Lab. And I'll use this to do my search. And so here I've typed in World War II. And when I do the search, it'll first show me all the resources related to my search term. If I'd like to see Learning Lab collections, though, I'll click on this tab here. Depending on what you search for, sometimes you'll find very many or very few resources. For World War II, though, we found quite a few. We found over 22,000, which is a lot. But luckily, there are some tools I can use to help me narrow this down. So I could filter by resource type. So say, I just want to see images of objects and artwork that I find kind of within the museum. I can filter by the museum or resource provider as well. So I'm curious to see what the Smithsonian American Art Museum might have. When I'm done selecting my terms, I click the blue Update Search button, and I've been able to shrink my search from over 22,000 to just over 200, which is a lot more manageable. Let's take a look at one of these resources. So each image here is a resource that if I click on it, I can view it more in depth, learn a little bit more about it. The images you'll find in the Learning Lab are high resolution, where you can zoom in and see a lot of detail. And then if you'd like to learn more, on the left-hand side of the screen, there are a few ways to interact. You If you'd like to learn more about what the resource is, you'll click on the information button at the top. This will show you information about the resource, and typically that includes who created it, where it was created, when it was created if we know. Many will also have descriptive information, either typically giving a little bit of contextual information about what this resource is and why it's historically and culturally significant. I'll pause for a moment. I see there is a question in the chat from Linda. Hi, Linda. Linda asks, what identifying information do you collect on your users? That is a great question. It's really as much as you're willing to share, and it actually varies by age as well. So for users 13 and up, you have, all users have kind of the same registration process. You can choose to use your real name or not. You can choose, we request the birth year to protect the privacy of users under the age of 13, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But everything else, including kind of who you are you an educator, are you a homeschool parent, etc. It's really, we give it up to you to decide how much you want to share with us. For users under the age of 13, they have slightly restricted permissions on the lab. Philippa, thank you for sharing those links in the chat. This will talk more about it, but users under the age of 13 need their parents' permission to sign up. They're given a pre-generated username, and while they can kind of create collections, they can't publish them, again, in an effort to protect their privacy. At the bottom of every page on the Learning Lab, you'll also find a couple certifications here alongside our privacy statement. We're iKeepSafe certified, and you can learn more about that at the bottom. I'm just looking to see if there are any other questions I missed in the chat. But I think kind of, please feel free to keep entering questions as we move forward, but I want to turn it over to Philippa, who's going to share kind of a really wonderful method of helping any type of learner engage with an artwork and start a discussion about it, especially in a digital format. So Philippa, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, so here I'm adding into the chat the collection that we're looking at.
But don't go to it just yet. Right?
Oh, right. Don't go. All right, I won't.
And you'll see why in a moment.
Okay, so what we thought to do is to model a looking activity. These come from, is anyone familiar with Harvard Education's Project Zero thinking routines? So I see one nod. Well, we want to do this, one, because it's a really fun activity to show you, but also because we've really configured the lab. We've put a lot of these resources up on the lab so that you can do this very easily with your own students. So to just get us started, I'd like you to just look at this image, and we're going to take about 2, 3, even 4 minutes for this of just looking. And if you would write into the chat what you see. So this is a routine called See, Think, Wonder. So for instance, if you say, I see orange, that would be something you see. If you say, I see a church or whatever, that's already something that you think. So for this, you're going to talk about shapes and colors and lines and really what you see. And Tess is moving us around the screen so that you can look really carefully at every piece of it. So if you could just put your observations into the chat, and we'll go from there. It might take a little while to look. So let's see what we've gotten in. We have from Tiffany, gray, white, orange, rounded, straight, pointy. Tess says she sees clusters. Brock says industry, technology, war. Regina says, I see sharp angles and curved lines. Heather says, circles, lines, jagged and rounded shapes. Melanie sees silhouettes. Kim sees white puffy shapes around the edges. Noah sees smoke and clouds. Regina sees orange, black, white, and gray. Courtney, a small amount of green and blue. Regina, contrast. Yellow, blue, red from Tiffany. Tasha, engines, weapons, contained smoke in the ecosystem. Diana, clouds, futuristic shapes. Linda, I see dark silhouettes of war machinery. I see gray smoke like shapes. And Courtney sees dots.
And if I could pop in for a moment when people are thinking, as I was reading through, I saw a really wonderful wondering that came through in the thinks about trying to figure out what the dots represent here.
Mhm. Great, there's some really great things here. Here, what does orange represent as a color? Would this be a place for people or just machines? Why the bright orange? Why the orange against the black? What was the artist trying to communicate when creating this piece? Is there a reflection? I wonder who made this and where and when. I wonder about those big zigzag jagged lines in the orange-black central cross-section. What the red and orange sphere represents. What inspired the artist? What the different colors represent. Why is it on top and bottom, potentially representing the globe? Why is there a dividing dotted angle in the image for what is on either side of it is the same? Why have orange at all? What is the artist's intention or message? I wonder if this is a laser meant to focus the energy of these industries to destroy or target something. I wonder what represents the crayon colors outlining the mansion and clouds. What are the clouds? Smoke. I wonder about these two main colors, orange and black. Question, how do you feel this process compares to visual thinking thread? Let's go back to that after, Heather, that's great. I wonder if the dotted line might represent a horizon line and that the bottom part might be a reflection. Am I overthinking this? That's the perfect end to that section. So, well, what we can do now to follow up, we actually have a video with the curator. So let's watch that and then we'll come back and sort of regroup afterwards.
All right, we're gonna see. I think I've set this up properly. Philippa, let me know if you don't hear the sound coming through.
Okay. No, I don't hear the sound.
Oh no. Well, let me just double check. Philippa's just shared the link to the collection in the chat where kind of after today's session you can navigate to watch the video. I'm just double
Tess?
checking to see if I can.
Okay. One other possibility is I can share the screen from my side and see if it will work.
Okay.
What do you want to?
I think if you want to try it.
Okay, so
Yeah,
try if you
I
yield.
checked that button. What I thought was that button, and it didn't work, unfortunately.
Not to say it will work. I've had it work and not work, and I don't know why.
Well, here, let's try to share yours, Philippa.
Okay.
And then if not, I know you have talked about this piece so many times, and
It's okay. Yeah, we'll be fine.
it's a
So let's.
really wonderful piece.
Okay, does everyone see the collection?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is what the Learning Lab collection is. So that's what we included the link for in the chat. And so now I'm going to click on the tile of the curator, the video with the curator, and hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Let's see.
No.
Anything? No.
Shipping Faith Rock was painted by
Too bad.
This is an artist's vision.
I hear it, but it's very, very quiet.
Oh.
I wonder if because you have headphones in, because sometimes if you unplug your headphones, then we can hear your sound. I don't know. Maybe not.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, that's better.
Oh, okay. Let me just move it back then. Hang on. Thank you.
It's another problem I've had.
Shifting States Iraq was painted by Luis Saceta. This is an artist's vision of the unrest that is taking place in Iraq. I think throughout Luis's career, he's been interested in exploring the human condition during times of crisis. And this really comes from his own experience as someone who experienced revolution himself. He was part of the first migration of Cubans to the United States after the Cuban Revolution of 1959. And ever since then, really, he's been focused on depicting contemporary history. One of the fascinating things about Luis and about the way that he works is that he is representing contemporary events, but they're not photographic representations, right? They're metaphorical. They're in many cases abstract, as is the case with Shifting States Iraq. And what you see in the painting is this huge, I like to think of it as an amoebic form right in the center. And there are two colors that are butting up against each other, and they're almost like warring each other in conflict, in opposition to each other. And then around this large form, there are other forms that are emerging out of it that we can recognize. So there are references to mosques, weapons, oil rigs. There are these satellites that might refer to surveillance or satellites that we use for social media. The central image is encapsulated in almost like an explosion. On the edges of the canvas, there's all this gray and smoke. And even around it, if you look very closely at it, there are all these markings that he's done with crayon that to me kind of evoke individuals and people and humanity, because you could actually see his own hand that has created these forms. There's also a sense throughout the painting of something bubbling up. There are images that look like bubbling oil, in fact. The painting is very textual, so when you approach it, you can see how these droplets of paint that give the painting a physical depth. There is this round circular form that looks like a petri dish. It looks like cells that are kind of becoming, something is becoming. It also looks like a red earth, alluding to this worldwide conflict. There are many, many forms that he embeds in the image, but he doesn't tell us what to think about it. He sort of throws it out there in this large form, and we as viewers need to decipher it and to make sense of a world and a moment that is.
Okay.
momentous, but also shifting. I really wanted to bring shifting states into the collection for many reasons. I was very interested.
Well, we can take this moment to wrap up. I think our time ran quickly. Philip and I were just texting. We weren't sure with the kind of timing of today when we would stop. But Philip, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I can share just a couple things before we leave.
Sure.
So in this Learning Lab collection that Philippa created, we are going to include additional examples of collections that we hope will be inspiring to all of you, as well as ideas for moving forward from today. There's a collection prompt there if you want to continue having the discussion on the lab. But also ideas for continuing this looking that we just did with shifting states. Philip and I were originally planning to move forward and talk about a really wonderful routine for then having larger conversations about perspectives on local, personal, and national levels. But again, if you'd like to keep talking with us, please get in touch. We would love to continue talking with you over email. I'm going to put our email addresses again up on the screen. Apologies for running over. I see Philippa, but we really thank you all for all of your wonderful ideas, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.